If you live each day as if it was your last, someday you'll most certainly be right. It made an impression on me, and since then, for the past 33 years, I've looked in the mirror every morning and asked myself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I am about to do today? And whenever the answer has been no for too many days in a row, I know I need to change something. Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life. Because almost everything, all external expectations, all pride, all fear of embarrassment or failure, these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important. Remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There is no reason not to follow your heart.
January 9th, 2007. San Francisco's Moscone Center. 10,000 people hold their breath. Security guards stand at every exit. Journalists from around the world have their pens ready. And then, a man in a black turtleneck walks onto the stage. No suit, no tie, just jeans, sneakers, and that smile. Every once in a while, a revolutionary product comes along that changes everything. And Apple has been very fortunate. It's been able to introduce a few of these into the world. What came next didn't just launch a product. It launched a new world. A world where the phone in your pocket could hold the internet, your music, your memories, and eventually, your entire life. But what the world didn't know was that this man standing on that stage had once been fired, humiliated, left for nothing, cast out of the very company he had built from a garage floor. This is the story of Steve Jobs, a story of genius, obsession, failure, and resurrection of a boy who had nothing, who built everything, lost it all, and then became the most influential man of his generation.
An iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. An iPod, a phone. Are you getting it? These are not three separate devices. This is one device. iPhone. Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone.
February 24th, 1955. San Francisco. A young graduate student named Joanne Stiebel gives birth to a baby boy. She is unmarried. Her parents disapprove of the father, a Syrian man named Abdel Fattah Jandali. She has no choice but to give the child up for adoption. The baby is taken in by Paul and Clara Jobs, a working-class couple in Mountain View, California. They name him Stephen Paul Jobs. Paul Jobs was a machinist, a man who loved working with his hands. He had a workbench in the garage, and from the time little Steve could walk, he would stand him beside it and teach him to build things, to understand how objects work and to see what others couldn't. As he later recalled, he showed him that he could build things with his hands. He would show him how to take apart a television set. Steve was always fascinated by electronics. Mountain View in the 1960s wasn't just a suburb. It was the ground floor of what would become Silicon Valley. Engineers from Hewlett-Packard lived next door to IBM designers. The garage wasn't just a garage, it was a laboratory. And for young Steve Jobs, growing up surrounded by tinkerers and dreamers, the world felt full of possibilities. But school was a different story. He was brilliant, but he was also bored, rebellious, and difficult. He prank-called teachers. He released snakes in classrooms. He refused to do work he found pointless. Teachers either despised him or adored him. There was never a middle ground with him. And then, at 13 years old, a meeting that would change the trajectory of history. A neighbor introduced him to Bill Hewlett, the co-founder of HP. He cold-called the man, actually picked up a phone book, found the number, and called him. And Hewlett didn't hang up. He answered. They talked for 20 minutes. and then he offered the teenager a summer job. It was a lesson he would carry his entire life. If you want something, ask for it. The worst anyone can say is no. Steve enrolled at Reed College in Portland. He lasted one semester before dropping out. Not because he failed, but because he felt guilty spending his parents' money on classes that seemed meaningless. So he dropped out, slept on dorm room floors, returned Coke bottles for food money, and audited the classes he wanted to take. One of those classes? Calligraphy, the art of beautiful lettering. It seemed completely impractical, completely useless, until, a decade later, it became the reason the Macintosh had the most beautiful fonts ever seen on a personal computer. The world's first typographically beautiful computing experience. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. Jobs meets Steve Wozniak. Or rather, he'd known Wozniak for years. But now, in 1976, Woz had done something incredible. He'd built a personal computer from scratch. Not for money, just because he could. He saw something Wozniak didn't. He saw a product, revolution, and a company. On April 1st, 1976, Steve Jobs, Wozniak, and Ronald Wayne signed the documents that created Apple Computer Company. Wayne sold his 10% stake back for $800. It would later be worth billions. They worked out of the Jobs family garage in Los Altos. Paul Jobs cleared the space, built a workbench, wired up power. Steve Jobs, 21 years old, was about to try to sell computers to the world, a world that had never wanted one before. Apple exploded. The Apple II became the best-selling personal computer in history. Jobs became a multi-millionaire at 23, then a celebrity and something more symbol. But it was 1984 that cemented his legend. During the Super Bowl, Apple aired a commercial unlike anything the world had ever seen. Directed by Ridley Scott, it showed a dystopian gray world of mindless conformity being shattered by a single woman smashing a giant screen. No product was shown, no price, no features listed, just the words. On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984. Marketing had never been done this way. Nothing had ever been done this way. Steve Jobs wasn't selling a computer. He was selling a vision of the future.
Where is the impact going to be felt most? In the intellectual process? In the day-to-day living process that is running the household?
What we have seen in almost all applications of personal computers that have happened to date. The industry is only 5 years old, but we've shipped, in excess of 150,000 personal computers ourselves. We've seen a dramatic increase in the creativity of people in dealing with a problem. Rather than doing the drudgery, rather than using traditional tools.
Empires are fragile things, and Steve Jobs had a fatal flaw. He was impossible. He screamed at engineers. He reduced people to tears. He labeled work as either brilliant or garbage with nothing in between. He had what people called a reality distortion field, the ability to make people believe they could do the impossible. But that same force could also destroy people. Apple's board had had enough. In 1985, they brought in John Sculley, a Pepsi executive Jobs himself had recruited with the now legendary line, "Do you want to sell sugared water for the rest of your life? Or do you want to come with me and change the world?" Sculley came, and then betrayed him. In May 1985, after a failed attempt by Jobs to oust Sculley, the Apple board voted. Jobs was stripped of all his responsibilities. The man who had founded Apple was pushed out of his own company. Steve Jobs, age 30, was fired. He later called it the best thing that ever happened to him. But in that moment, it felt like death. In his words, "I didn't see it then, but it turned out that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me." The heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again, less sure about everything. It freed me to enter one of the most creative periods of my life. He founded Next, a new computer company. He bought a small animation studio for $5 million and renamed it. You may have heard of it. He called it Pixar. While Apple stumbled and nearly collapsed without him, Pixar went on to make Toy Story, the world's first fully computer-animated feature film, and changed cinema forever. Jobs, who had known nothing about animation when he bought the company, became a billionaire from its IPO. The exile wasn't a failure. It was a metamorphosis. By 1997, Apple was 90 days from bankruptcy. Its market share had collapsed. Its products were a mess. Its brand was dying. The company that had once challenged IBM was now barely keeping the lights on. Apple needed a miracle, so they called their exile home. Apple acquired Next for $429 million, and as part of the deal, Steve Jobs came back. Within months, he had reorganized the entire company, cut the product line from dozens to 4, and launched a campaign that would redefine the brand forever. Here's to the crazy ones. The misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs and the square holes. The ones who see things differently. The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. Then came the products. 1998, the iMac, a translucent, candy-colored computer so beautiful that people bought it just to look at it. It saved Apple. 2001, the iPod, 1,000 songs in your pocket. The music industry would never recover. 2003, the iTunes Store. Legal digital music for 99 cents a song. Jobs had convinced every major record label to cooperate, something no one thought possible. And then, January 9th, 2007, the iPhone, the device that made everything before it look primitive. The device that turned Apple from a great company into the most valuable company in human history. In just 10 years, he had resurrected Apple from the dead and built it into a global empire. Apple became the first American company to reach $1 trillion valuation, then $2 trillion, then 3. I want to put a ding in the universe. And he did. But the universe, it seems, doesn't play favorites. In 2003, Steve Jobs was diagnosed with a rare form of pancreatic cancer. For 9 months, he refused surgery. He tried fruit diets, acupuncture, herbal remedies. His biographer Walter Isaacson later said it was the one decision of his life he truly regretted. When he finally agreed to the operation, doctors feared it had spread too far. But the surgery worked for a time. Jobs continued building. The iPhone, the iPad, the MacBook Air, so thin it arrived in a manila envelope on stage. But the cancer returned. And by 2011, the world could see it in his face. At the iPad 2 launch, he walked out onto the stage, thin, pale, moving carefully. The audience erupted. They knew what it meant for him to be there. And so did he. In August 2011, Steve Jobs resigned as CEO of Apple. Tim Cook took over. He sent a single note to the board. I have always said if there ever came a day when I could no longer meet my duties and expectations as Apple's CEO, I would be the first to let you know. Unfortunately, that day has come. On October 5th, 2011, surrounded by his family in his home in Palo Alto, he passed away. He was 56 years old. The world stopped. Apple stores became shrines, piled with flowers and handwritten notes. World leaders offered tributes. Billions of people who had never met him felt a personal grief. Because he wasn't just a CEO. He was the man who had put the world's knowledge in everyone's pocket, who had taught the world that design matters. That technology could be beautiful. That products could have a soul. His last words, according to his sister Mona Simpson, were 4 words spoken as he looked past his family at something none of them could see.
3 things: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communications device. An iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. An iPod, a phone.
So what does the life of Steve Jobs teach us? First, Curiosity is a superpower. Steve's calligraphy class seemed useless. His garage experiments seemed silly, but the dots always connected. Follow what fascinates you, even when no one else understands it. Second, rejection is not the end. He was fired from his own company at 30. He could have walked away. Instead, he went and built Pixar. The exile made him stronger. Failure is a chapter, not the story. Third, obsession with craft matters. Jobs cared about the design of parts of the computer no one would ever see. He made engineers make the inside of the Mac beautiful, because he believed it mattered. Whatever you do it like it matters. Fourth, ask for what you want. He cold called Bill Hewlett from a phone book at 13. He convinced record labels to trust him with digital music. The ask is everything. And fifth, your time is limited. Don't waste it living someone else's life. Stay hungry. Stay foolish. The world belongs to those who refuse to settle. Steve Jobs was not a perfect man. He was often cruel, often difficult, and deeply flawed. But his life asks all of us a question we can't avoid. What would you build if you actually believed it was possible?
And that's the story of Steve Jobs, a boy given away at birth who grew up to give the world some of the most transformative technology it has ever seen. A man who was broken by failure and rebuilt himself into something greater. Think different. Those two words were supposed to describe Apple, but really, they described him. If this story moved you, if it challenged you, if it made you think, let me know in the comments. I read every single one. Tell me, what's the one lesson from Steve Jobs that hits hardest for you? And if you're new here, welcome to the channel. We tell stories like this every week. Stories of extraordinary people who changed the world through vision, obsession, and the refusal to give up. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss one.